I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. How are you guys doing out there? I hope you had a great weekend. I really do, and I really appreciate you starting the beginning of your week here with us. The intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine, and we cannot do it without you guys listening. I see Dorothy Crockett just joined us on Facebook. Patriot. Dorothy, thank you so much for listening to the show. And everybody else who's joining on right now. We're broadcasting across stations across Arkansas, as well as our digital presence at conduitnews.com, facebook.com/conduitnews, as well as the YouTube channel. And so we really appreciate you guys listening. We want to provide as many mediums as we possibly can. Now, we are in the middle of our coverage, right? Week 6 of our coverage of the 92nd General Assembly. This is something that happens, and they meet every 2 years, for now at least. There's some people that want to change that. They go down to the Marble Palace, and this is where they talk policy. They try to pass bills and laws and everything else. Every 2 years, we really need about 1,500 new laws. A lot of people don't realize that, but if we didn't have the 1,500 new laws, civilization would crumble from underneath us. It would be awful. And so we're in the middle of covering that. One of the things that happened last week, and that's probably going to happen this week, is half of the governor's highway plan, the half that has a new tax in it, wholesale tax on gas and diesel, meaning your prices will go up at the pump. That cleared the full Senate last week. It's expected to clear the full House this week. They only got to have, enough votes to get out of the committee, and then need to have 51 votes on the House floor, 51 out of 100. And that's expected to happen. And we'll talk a little bit more about this at 7 o'clock because, by the way, there's also this outrageous story about DHS employees stealing from blind people. Wait till you hear this. I couldn't believe this. I read this story like 6 times yesterday. I just got angrier and angrier every time I read it. But anyway, trying to keep the old anger monster, me personally, trying to keep that under control. So we'll talk about that. But, okay, there is a story where right now, I don't know if you've noticed it, but this kind of puts things into perspective for me. Gas prices right now, ladies and gentlemen, are on the rise. Now, I know we've been very blessed right now, to have these lower gas prices, and that's why legislators, they have admitted such. Not all of them, but a few years back there was a commission on what are we going to do about the roads, and the bureaucrats and politicians pretty much agreed that if they were going to tax your fuel anymore in any capacity, new or current, they needed to do it now because gas prices are, at rock bottom prices. And that's the truth. They are. I've been enjoying it's been as low as $1.90. $1.90. Anybody else have something lower than that? Pretty much the lowest price over the last couple weeks. The last month has been $1.90. Now it's ticked up to like $2.09. Well, just think about this. It'd be, I guess what, 10, 11, 12. It'd be $2.12 if the highway tax increase goes through. Now, I don't know about you, but, that really burns me up. I don't know about you, but I go by the same gas station pretty much every day, and that's the one that I peg and I watch it, I'm sure many of you do the same thing in your habitual routes as you're driving around. You go by a specific gas. Or if you go by a gas station, most people are like, oh, well, I'll go ahead and check what the price is right now. Boom, there it is. Because a lot of people fill up once a week, and so you don't. But, I mean, it's been really good, $1.90. I don't know, maybe it got even as low as $1.89. I don't know. But, if the state of Arkansas goes forward with this, you're looking at tacking on 3 cents. Now, maybe that 3 cents, 6 cents if we're talking about diesel, maybe that 3 cents is not a big deal to you. It's not a big deal to some of these legislators. Maybe it's not a big deal. But what if we get back up to $4? What if we get back up to $4 a gallon gas? All of a sudden, I mean, that 3 cents, in my opinion, it's a lot more significant, right? I mean, if you're having to pay, $3.97 for gas, that 3 cents is going to mean something. And we're going to say thank you very much, state of Arkansas. Now, that'll probably happen in the future. They'll have passed this, and the money that we're paying the government will be used to create amazing roads by that point, and so we'll probably all be happy, right? See, another fundamental question that needs to be asked about this whole situation is, why do they need more of our money in the first place? Now, they would tell you, the government response would be, well, there's more fuel-efficient vehicles, we're not getting, our revenue's declining and everything else. Well, revenue is declining, with specific funding measures, but the revenue from the people is continuing to increase every single year. The government gets more and more money every single year. So the question really is, what is being done to change behavior so you won't come back to the people when you take new money from us now and the roads still won't get built in the capacity that you want, in the capacity that the people want, because the people do. Make no mistake, the people want, generally, they want the government to, pay for good roads. They want the people to pay for good. I mean, people are willing to pay the tax, but we're already paying the tax. That's the point. And so the government, from what I can tell, the government has demonstrated, and there really hasn't even been a conversation on it. Maybe there will be. I understand Senator Dismang has some legislation to try to address the highway department because it's a branch of our, it's like a constitutional agency. But there's got to be some altering of behavior, I feel like. Because it just seems like when it comes to roads, it's something we all agree on, but it's lower on the priority list because we'd rather have welfare programs over here, or we'd rather kick the can down the road and not cut spending over here. Roads are a priority, but cutting spending is not a priority. We wouldn't have to have this tax increase if cutting spending was as high of a priority as they claim roads are. In terms of a want, roads are way up there, right? We all desire better roads. Well, do we want to cut spending so we can pay for it? And the answer, what we're seeing out of Little Rock right now, is no, we're not going to cut spending. We're going to ask you for more money. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is extremely frustrating. For me personally, for you out there, conservatives out there, but this seems to be the path. Now, we'll talk again a little bit more about this coming up at 7, but that's just my gut feeling. And that's what we've got on tap, I guess, coming up this week, is the highway tax increase will be heard in the House committee and then the full chamber later this week. Okay, real quick, some national news. There's a little bit of a point of personal privilege for me, is this headline here from USA Today. With women in combat roles, a federal court has ruled that the male-only draft is unconstitutional. Well, congratulations, women. You did it. Congrats. I mean, seriously, I wonder if on the this is the first thing that came across my mind was I wonder if those women who have participated over the decades of feminism and the growing movement that it has always been. I wonder if women who have, even mildly, or maybe you participated in it when you were younger, maybe you see things a little different now. Maybe you think feminism is a good thing, but maybe not what it's become, which is just not pro-women, but anti-man. I wonder if some of those original feminists were wanting to be drafted into combat roles so that they can prove that they are, in fact, equal to their male counterparts. And I just think, my suspicion is the answer was no. Now, maybe the more radical ones, but I think your rank and file feminists originally, they didn't want to go in. They didn't want to be drafted. They didn't want to be drafted, and I think a vast majority of them wouldn't want to be drafted now. As a father of a little girl, this is absolutely unacceptable. The idea of our little girls and young women being drafted into military service is outrageous. I think I remember the late Senator John McCain. He actually was he a proponent of this in some way? I can't remember specifically, but I'm almost certain there was some story about that happening. And now we have a federal court rules that the male-only draft is unconstitutional. Now, this is just the first step. They did not say or direct, the court did not direct how to make it constitutional. Okay, but they're essentially saying that drafting males only is not right, unconstitutional. Now, I want you to understand something here. We have no idea what it takes to secure liberty and have a civilization anymore. That's what I've come to. You can't draft men to go serve. Okay, all right. Well, I mean, is this any coincidence? I mean, these issues are coming out. These are basic issues of not Western civilization, just civilization in general, just basic issues, right? Protecting life at conception, the life in the womb, and then having a wall to control who can come in and out of your own country because our ideas are better than yours, and so that border represents an idea, and we're going to protect our citizens economically and physically. Nope, you're racist, And then we get this, the draft is now unconstitutional because women and men need to be equal. We've lost our minds. Because, see, biologically, we're not the same. Oh, but you can't. The fact that biologically we're not the same can't reflect itself in the laws that we write for ourselves. Generally, men are going to be better soldiers than women, period, because we're so much stronger. I mean, it's just the way it is. You think other countries that are actually serious about winning wars are going to put their women on the front lines or put their women in the military at all? My goodness. Ugh. If you're inefficient, inefficiencies in the military get you killed. But it was a federal judge in Texas declared that the all-male military draft is unconstitutional, ruling that the time has passed for a debate on whether women belong in the military. The decision deals the biggest legal blow to the selective service system since the Supreme Court upheld the draft registration in 1981. The court ruled that a male-only draft was fully justified because women were ineligible for combat roles. But U.S. District Judge Gray Miller ruled late Tuesday that while historical restrictions on women serving in combat may have justified past discrimination, men and women are now equally able to fight. Can you imagine going? That's such a preposterous statement. Can you imagine going to a woman and being like, hey, congratulations, you're being drafted. What? Wait, what? Yeah, you've been discriminated against all these years, and now women aren't discriminated against anymore. So, congratulations. Yeah, yay equality. I'm telling you. I mean, how many feminists, how many women out there participated in some level of feminism? You bought in. Maybe you were mad. Maybe you were one of these gals that was like, you would start getting upset when a man opens the door for you, stuff like that. Actually tries to treat you like you guys are biologically different. Like actually tries to treat you like, dare I say, the weaker sex, but, somebody that a man wants to help the woman and protect the woman and make sure that she's going to be provided for and everything else. Maybe you're one of these people that were like, you know what, that whole thing is so antiquated, and I just, I don't like it when men open the door for me. Okay, all right, you know what, you're perfectly entitled to feel that way, yada, yada, yada. In the meantime, that little line of thinking eventually gets a court ruling where we're talking about conscripting women to military service. Like Joe just said, yay, equality. Yeah. We're going to take a break. Let me know what you think about this. 870-275-9799. And listen, I don't mean to be offensive. I know there are women who are in the military who do a fantastic job. But we're talking about, the draft and it's just, it certainly is a time of the upheaval of our civilization in many ways. Certainly people would agree with me on that. We'll be back in just a moment.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
You know what I've realized? I've realized since covering Arkansas politics that the citizens of the great state of Arkansas are clamoring. They are demanding assisted suicide legislation. Hopefully you can pick up my sarcasm. There's been a bill filed by the one, the only State Representative Dan Douglas of Bentonville, HB 1536, that would legalize physician-assisted suicide in Arkansas. Yes, Joe, I know. It's it's what everybody's been picketing for out there. Here to talk more about this, we have the Director of Governmental Affairs for the Family Council, Mr. Ken Yang.
Times are tough for the Arkansas General Assembly. They're all waiting for the spotlight exposing public corruption to end, so they won't be under so much scrutiny. And during this time, what if you're a legislator and you need money? What if you're slapped with a huge expense? What if your check for consultant services is late this month? Or maybe you just need extra cash now until payday. When that happens, you can't wait. Hi, I'm Bobby Blackmail for the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank, your trusted source to over 135 lenders to get you short-term cash fast. Use the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank today, and you can have up to $12,500 cash in your checking account tomorrow. Dried-up bribes no longer coming from Medicaid entities? Handled. Extra cash until your hopeful acquittal? Done. And you'll be surprised at how easy it is to get extra cash. Just be an elected official and be comfortable with the status quo, and we'll connect you with a fellow legislator who is ready to loan. It's quick and easy. And don't worry if you can't make the payments, because the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank is designed to help you get through these tough economic times. There are other ways you can pay off your debt, like by voting the way the establishment wants, or by rewarding some with committee chairmanships. So forget about overdraft fees and the spirit of covetousness that sometimes overwhelms the best of lawmakers. Just remember, the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank for short-term cash between colleagues when you need it fast.
Some transactions have long-term consequences.
Paul Harrell, parody.
Find out more at conduitnews.com.
So the Arkansas Liberty Coalition on Friday And over the weekend, and really all last week, they bought constitutional attorney and talk radio host Chris Ann Hall was in Arkansas, and I got to go hear her speak again on Friday night, and it was the topic was America Disarmed. It was just incredible, the history that is not being taught surrounding the founding of our country. It's just absolutely fantastic. You know, you just wish you could have had every member of the Arkansas legislature there. You wish you could have had, you know, that it was a mandatory high school class, you know, or something. I mean, it's just incredible how serious those men took the idea of liberty. Not just men, but women also. She highlighted the women and what they did, and it was just incredible. And she had something specific that she said, that those who don't know history, right? You've heard. Those that don't know history are doomed to repeat it. She had a revised statement on that. It's those that don't know the mistakes that are made in history. Those that don't know history are doomed to repeat the mistakes of history. Because very much so, a lot of people have had this theory that history is cyclical. There are different ways to look at it. Some people go based on the generations and what different generations of people go through that, you know, kind of. But a lot of people think that history in a lot of ways is cyclical, rise and fall, ups, downs, that sort of thing. But those who don't know history are doomed to repeat the mistakes of history. I thought that was really, really good. And there were 86 people there. According to, that's what Tim Logan just said on the Facebook page. It was a great turnout both nights from up in my neck of the woods here in Jonesboro. And I know she headed down to Hot Springs the next day. So, let's see here. Anyway, all right. The phone number, 870-275-9799. Coming up on the program, we're going to be talking with Mr. David Colbert coming up at 7:33. It's been a couple years since we had him on the program. He is a guy that knows more about gambling addictions and this epidemic that nobody wants to talk about. We'll talk to him coming up at 6:33. Then State Representative Dan Sullivan will be calling on the program. He'll be on his way to Little Rock, I would assume, making the commute at 7:30. We're going to be talking about a bunch of things, the highway plan, as well as a little piece of legislation that he passed, and I'll tell you about that. I think he sponsored it. That had to do, I think it might have been a resolution or something, had to do with condemning some stuff that's going on in China. But we'll talk about all of that coming up at 7:33, and so you certainly don't want to miss that. Okay, here we go. President Trump, you talk about how anti-Trump everybody is. Even the LGBT RSTLNE, would you like to buy a Val community? When Trump tries to stand up for the LGBT community, he's called basically a bigot or a racist. Brittany Hughes over at Media Research TV, the LGBT magazine, calls Trump a racist for telling Iran to stop killing and jailing gays. You can't make this stuff up, she writes, because in 2019, the truth really is stranger than fiction. Out Magazine, a pro-LGBT news publication that doubles as a gay advocacy platform, actually published a piece Wednesday claiming that it's, stay with me here, racist for the Trump administration to pressure nations like Iran to decriminalize homosexuality. I'll restate for the record. An openly pro-gay magazine is calling Donald Trump racist for trying to get regimes that jail and kill people for being gay to stop jailing and killing people for being gay. Again, you can't make this stuff up. She goes on, so I'll let Out's Matthew Rodriguez do the talking for me in his article entitled Trump's Plan to Decriminalize Homosexuality is an Old Racist Tactic. Rodriguez states, there are several signs that this decision is denoted in a colonial sense of paternalism rather than any true altruism. They can't get out of their own way, folks. Back in a moment. is back on the program. Ken, how you doing this morning?
Good. Oh, that was such a good Johnny Cash song.
Yeah, it is. It's one of, Roseanne Running Wild. It's a good one. Ken, talk to me a little bit. Like, what is the family council? Could you guys believe it when you saw that Dan Douglas filed a bill on assisted suicide?
You know, we had actually heard rumors that there were a couple of Republican state reps that were thinking about doing something like this. And we were just, maybe they'll think better because of the state we live in. We already have a law banning physician-assisted suicide. And we were going to do a resolution to reaffirm our belief in being against physician-assisted suicide. And then, lo and behold, Representative Douglas files this. And he really files this literally a couple days after he goes to the well to speak in favor of, honestly, late-term abortion. And when he's at the well talking about, what if so-and-so suffering, and what's odd is he makes the example of, well, there have been babies that have survived, but there have been babies that haven't. But he's not the arbiter. He's not, we're not here to play God.
Yeah.
And, it kind of makes sense that he would file this after going up there and practically endorsing physician-assisted suicide in regards to a baby. So why wouldn't he support physician-assisted suicide in regards to someone near the end of their life?
Yeah, it's fascinating because, he is a member of the Republican Party, and this is the, really low-hanging fruit, this pro-life issue. I mean, it's this most serious issue we face, but it is something that generally we all agree on. And when he went down to talk against Senator Rapert's bill that would ban abortion in Arkansas in the event Roe versus Wade is overturned, he maintained he was speaking against it because it goes too far. He maintained that he was still pro-life. Like you said, Ken, there are babies who are diagnosed with this, that, or the other that are told that, they're not going to survive, but then they do survive. Then there are also miracles that happen, I believe. And so under Dan Douglas's, I guess, in his opinion, we're just going to discount the possibility that a miracle can actually happen and the baby can survive and live a normal life.
Yeah, and let's make it clear. I mean, people want to throw around the term pro-life, and in this instance, in Representative Douglas' instance, he needs to understand that when you say that you're pro-life, that means you protect life from conception to natural death. And in both instances now, he
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, good morning, everybody out there. Some of you taking your first sips of coffee, and I've had a 16-ounce Red Bull. All right, well, almost had a 16-ounce Red Bull. The sugar-free kind, because that's probably much better for you. I'm lying to myself. All right, I want to welcome to the program. Back on the program, we have Mr. David Colbert is with us. He is a mental health activist. David, thanks for coming back on, sir.
Thank you, Paul. We've now set the world record for having a anti-lottery person on an actual media show. Paul, this is like 3 times over a decade that anyone in the media has decided that we really should address the impact of the lottery on mental health and on addictions, not just gambling addiction. But you and I know the story about gambling addiction. We're the only state in America currently investing $0.00 in decreasing the known impacts of gambling. Mm-hmm. And we've added more gambling. And this administration in particular seems to be off the charts friendly to the industry, to a point. If we look at the situation with the lottery in particular, there's actually a loss associated with our lottery.
What you're talking about, hang on, you mean the scholarship lottery for children, David?
I mean for every lottery in America. When we look at 44 states who consciously utilize a revenue production vehicle that has a tremendous negative economic impact, combined with the economic impact of addiction, which comes hand in hand with the product. Sold in a monopoly environment, harms the local economies, no doubt, but it harms the overall economy of America because it is a non-tax, monopoly-based, age-restricted product. At this point, the addiction in this state, in Arkansas, the addiction we see, keep gambling alone. No other drugs involved. Gambling alone. All products. Lottery. Online. Sports betting. Casinos. Is the fastest growing addiction measured in our country among kids 12 to 17 and among seniors 65 years and older. Combining that with the fact that our state, Arkansas, my state, your state, is 47th out of 50 measured states in having any access at all to mental health services. This would include counseling. This includes getting someone who perhaps is suicidal and needs critical care into a facility to have a bed. I agree with you, Paul. There's nothing about this for children. If, in fact, it were for children, they would have instituted programs initially and had the opportunity to educate the public about the problems, the health problems that exist with gambling, to educate the public about making a choice. We love to hear people who like to use the famous line, well, David, that's a personal choice. Nothing is a personal choice when you strategically and persistently advertise to the public with 100% message of win, 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 win. You've never heard an ad since this lottery started, ever. You've never had one on your radio station, Paul. I know this. Actually, no one in Arkansas has ever run a 30-second commercial that addressed problem gambling. That alone is actionable cause in my book. Never even an ad.
Yeah, like a PSA. Yeah.
No, but it'd be nice to have a PSA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it'd be nice. Having a background in the TV industry, you and I know this, public service, unless there's some groups that are involved that have a little bit of sway in the market, those are going to run overnight. You're not really going to. By no means can you impact or offset the promotional side of gambling by running a 3 o'clock ad. A 30-second ad.
Yeah,
3.
Exactly. Yeah. The money.
I'll quit, Paul. You know me. I get going.
No, I appreciate it. I think
to close that hotline, the problem gambling helpline was closed, and I am talking about totally closed, not funded at all, for counseling or for treatment or for any type of education, prevention. This is 5 years. Literally 5 years.
Well, you know what?
So
what I think
the power is doing something. So
yeah, let me say this. What I think about this. We're talking, by the way, with David Colbert. He's a mental health activist. I've ran into you several times since we've been covering the session in general down there, and I always know this is your big issue. But I think a lot of people would say, okay, this is a government-sanctioned vice. And you bring up a good point that it's also a monopoly, and that's a whole nother can of worms. Because if you wanted to make it legal for people to do what the mob used to do, which was run numbers, which was found to be illegal, and now it's like, well, if the government says it's okay, we can regulate it, but it's also a monopoly, and it's creating these addictions. you know, a lot of people would say, well, to have a helpline at all, or to fund, and see, from a limited government standpoint, I'm like, you see what the government's done here? They sanction something, and then, now there's calls to fund something else to clean up the mess that they created in the first place.
Right. Well, it was done in the beginning. This is the power of the state lotteries, period. This legislative action was passed on 2 occasions, in 2010, 2011, and it's actually been available to the state since it started. My involvement goes back to the very, very, very beginnings of it. I had the opportunity to write portions of Act 606, which was the enabling legislation. Johnny Key made it a point to say, David's, and I've known Johnny for a long time, so I call him Johnny. He said, Colbert's right. There's nothing in here about covering anything to do with prevention or education, or there wasn't anything in the original language that dealt with problem gambling, period. Zero. Not even a mention of it. It is common across America for lotteries to dedicate 1%, perhaps 1% of their gross annually, toward those education, prevention, everything the tobacco industry is forced to do, the lottery gambling industry should do. Everything that, granted, it's a government thing again, but Arkansas, unlike any state that I've been associated with or ever had the opportunity to work with, consciously understands these things are happening and yet has denied services. And I don't play that, like I'm trying to make the government out to be. I will make it out to be this way. They realize that this is an addiction. They realize this product is medically defined, and I'll agree and disagree, Paul, on this basis. Addiction is addiction is addiction, and when we look at it overall as far as the impact goes, that person who has an addiction in the gambling arena brings as much, if not more, harm to themselves and others than an alcoholic, than a drug addict. There is no substance, surely, involved, so it's difficult to see. But earlier what I was saying is Arkansas, unlike any state I'm familiar with, is so aggressively marketing this product that they put a minor child in a TV ad.
Now, hang on. You told me about this. I remember when this happened. Now, and this was blatantly against the regulations that are set on this, right? They're not supposed to use children to actually advertise, right?
Well, let me address some legislation that has been introduced and will be introduced again. First and foremost, the Arkansas State Lottery and every American lottery needs to be held accountable by the same standards and practices that a private advertiser or someone in the free market has to. Budweiser would be not shut down. Budweiser would have been fined millions and millions and millions of dollars, and most likely had their advertising stopped and all. Imagine a tobacco company putting an ad on that showed children picking cigarettes and handing them out to adults.
Is it? But this ad in question, though, was it to try to highlight the scholarship lottery aspect of it?
Absolutely not. It had 2 young girls in it, and natural state jackpot. A gentleman in there with writing numbers down, and the kids were dancing on a hopscotch on concrete, picking the numbers for a numbers game. Exactly what they were doing.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, that does seem a little in bad taste, and that's an understatement.
Well, go to a retailer. You'll see Willy Wonka next to candy. You will see a scratch ticket advertised in a point-of-purchase display that will be put next to products that are tremendously child-focused products. And they'll sit back and say, well, blah, blah, blah. The point, again, is no one is overseeing this. For whatever reason, the conviction I had when this passed was the knowledge of what would occur. Can we reduce the things that you and I... There are things in life that you and I know we can prevent. And we can teach people to... Easy enough. Not, the stove zone, don't touch it. Do it again, do it again. What we've got got with Arkansas in particular and children in the lottery is they hired a company that is tremendously aggressive out of Europe, out of the United Kingdom. People should be aware of that. They were not aware of that. It was what we've seen way too much in this state, Paul. It was an overnight, no doubt, agreed upon inside the circle of whoever made the decision to hire a Camelot, a firm called Camelot, based in the United Kingdom, who has never run a North American lottery, ever. So we pay them, from what I understand, upwards to $1 billion, with a B. The people of this state have to wake up across the board about what our government is doing at the state level about no-bid contracts. They are a problem not only with the monopoly gambling operation, they're a problem across the board that I've seen professionally for nearly 3 decades. And the end result is not only bad state government, it's corrupt practices that become a part of this vehicle called the lottery also. You know, go back again to the beginning. Johnny Key said we never should have sold a single ticket without having programs in place, just like we do to teach children about alcohol consumption or about tobacco consumption. And again, it is a government product.
Yeah.
Thank you to the government again for looking at it and saying, we make more money off of addiction than we do off of conservative. Well, they don't have a conservative practices, period.
And it's also worth to note, you know, when you were mentioning earlier, it's such a fast-growing addiction, and you compared it with alcohol and drug use. The interesting thing is, a lot of times, you know, the alcohol and the drug use goes really well with gambling. You know, it's it
exists, right? I call it coexisting.
Yeah.
Some of it call it co-occurring. And take it again from David. You know, recovering guy, alcoholic, used alcohol because I'm manic depressive. And when you're manic in particular, and Paul's known me long enough to know I'm just a really high energy, passionate guy, but mania is dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, not only that, but it's dangerous in the way you...
We're talking with David Colbert. He's a mental health activist. We're talking about the scholarship lottery and lotteries in general.
We'll talk about gambling, Paul, because we're adding casinos.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to get to. I wanted to get to the casino situation. So now Arkansas has written in its constitution. You talk about monopoly. We now have in our constitution written in monopolies for casinos. You know, 2 new ones in Pope and Jefferson, and the expansion of Oaklawn and Southland. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, have you seen a lot of is there a lot more money coming in now? Is there a lot more lobbying that's being done because of this?
The industry on a national and statewide basis has now become, the last data I saw, the gambling industry is in fact the number 1 lobbyist. They spend more money at the state and federal level just to do things like you've seen here in Arkansas, which is manipulate the legislative process to protect themselves in 2 ways. Number 1, monopolies against competition, but the worst one, the one that's going to harm us here, I hate to say this because I'm a guy who wants to deal with public health, the tax rates on these casinos is off. I've never seen anything as absurdly approached. They want to add slots. And I'm talking about massive amounts of slot machines, likely anywhere from 50 to 75,000 between 4 facilities. And you'll probably go, that's crazy. That's true, though. You've been to most larger casinos. They do have slot machines. That's their big producer.
Yeah.
But here, to tax those machines at a rate that is literally 11 to 12 points below the national standards, that's money. The state says, quote unquote, we're going to produce this revenue, it's going to help. The reality is gambling as an industry doesn't have to have red in their ledger. And that is correct. I mean, when you think about them as an industry, they have a red profit side. They, literally speaking, even the lottery, doesn't show the loss against whatever their profit is. So it's hard to comprehend as a private sector person how the industry can really operate without massively, in some ways, bringing public health harms, because much of their profits come from people, as you said, who already have alcohol problems, who already have some drug-related problems. Pine Bluff is going to be a huge problem. I worked in opposition to Pine Bluff. I worked somewhat with Russellville, who I think Pope County likely will not see a casino, but it'll be in the area. Pine Bluff is an example of what occurs when a town in particular, as we've seen across America, when cities and metropolitan areas fall to bad times, literally speaking, economically, employment-wise. Pine Bluff's very much well-defined as such. Many, many, many of them have turned to gambling. And in our case, I'm certain that Oakland and Southland and the casinos that came in and the lottery had a strategy. Never allow anyone to tell you the gambling industry is not buddies. They may compete, but here, literally, as you said, because they're monopolistic, they wrote their own tax rates. That was a part of this. I have to firmly believe that the existing casinos did not fight this measure, as, again, Paul, the legislative guys did. And if you recall driving Arkansas forward, do you recall that, the measure?
Yeah, I do. And I 100% remember.
Do you recall the double truck statewide ad against it by 100? I don't know how many. They organized in opposition to that. The legislative body was heavily opposed to it. They took out advertising. They traveled. There was a group. Oakland, of course, was the major funder for this. But exactly the opposite occurred this time, not a peep. Mm-hmm. Not even the liberals that were, and then there were a number of liberals involved. The ones who were involved in opposing casinos in the past even peeped their heads above the set. And even those who I know are staunchly conservative, who've been with me from the beginning, didn't poke their heads up out of the hole. Mm. I have to again believe that the highway plan was somewhat a part of this. They looked at it and said, here's some revenue, and we really, my road plan is my, I suppose, legacy. I'm not sure what the governor's legacy is going to be honest with you. I have no idea. But when you look at that dedicated $35 million, a very similar approach in the past by myself and a few others was to go to the lottery and casinos and dedicate a stream of revenue directly to mental health services and addictions, with a plural, services, because of what you and I have confirmed today, which is, gambling is a non-substance substance, which in fact, many, if not all the time, has a problem that exists before the person begins to gamble. Women who are depressed, probably one of the most problematic forms of gambling for them are slot machines. Mm. And slots are designed from the get-go, psychologically, visually, to appeal to portions of the brain in some regard, which is a behavioral addiction. Yeah. And you said earlier when you were saying, well, that addicts people. That's true. There's two different scenarios here. We've got a product, like, let's comparatively speaking to alcohol here. All of a sudden, in Arkansas, we've only got 2 liquor stores, okay? We've got one and, a couple of them. That's all we got, right? Overnight, folks say, well, we're going to Arkansas. We want the government to run this. We want the government to take over the liquor business. Okay, that's fine. We wake up, and there's 2,000 liquor stores. There's only 2 for years and, forever. Now there's 2,000. So the first thing the government does to make more money is they go out and they say, look, we know we help people who are alcoholic, but we can't do that anymore. We've got to exploit the opportunity we have to maximize our revenue through addiction. If we're really lucky, we can shut down AA. We can stop those meetings too. But what we really have to do is look at any public education. We can't tell children in particular that alcohol has any harms at all. And this is exactly what they have done with lottery gambling. And guess who's included now? The casinos, because they've said to my face, David, we're never going to do this, meaning they're never going to voluntarily invest any money in these type of programs, quote unquote, unless the state makes us do it.
David,
go ahead.
We've got to go real quick. I want to ask, so you say there is legislation out there this session to try to address some of this stuff. Is that true?
Yes, sir. I've been blessed to be able to write it all. So I've got. Awesome. I will email you.
Email me.
You remember Senator Clark? Well, Senator Clark worked in 2015 with myself and some others on Senate Bill 488. It got passed finally, but then it was killed in committee. And what you'll see on gambling issues is rules in particular kills a ton of good bills that are policy related in gambling.
Yeah, David, we've got to go.
We've got to take the guys off this oversight committee that have, and they do have an interest, and most, if not all of them, voted to take away all these services. So it really is not a fair. Well, it's not a fair environment.
David, you are a wealth of knowledge. Let's have you back on. Let's talk again soon, okay, sir? And we'll get that bill number out.
Have a great day. I appreciate y'all.
Yes, sir.
God bless.
Folks, we'll have a write-up on this at conduitnews.com. We'll give you the bill number and a copy of this interview back in a minute.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799.
He does not fit that mold.
Wow. Yeah, that's you're exactly right. Natural death, not assisted suicide. Let me just see. Do I have the bill pulled up here? I have it. Yeah, I have it here. It is HB 1536, an act to create the Compassionate Care End of Life Opinion Act. Now, this is I know we keep going to Dan Douglas going down to the well. He had a personal story of I guess his niece who was pregnant, who had a tough pregnancy, but he kept saying things like we need to be pro-humanity when it comes to taking the life, and so it seems that to me is not humanity at all. I mean, I guess I've never seen a Republican be so completely 180 degrees off of what the mainstream of their party is.
Yes, I mean this is not pro-humanity. This is just honestly and fundamentally
determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back. Telephone number to text us or call 870-275-9799. When we come back for the second hour, I want to talk about this headline. Amanda, is it Curcio or Curcio? Curcio. Anyway, the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, in a story yesterday, headline, Vendor Closes Eatery at State Agency. Visually impaired owner cites thefts, bullying over prices. So you have a blind person running a business for a state agency, and DHS employees are stealing from her when she's not looking and giving her fake money, like giving her counterfeit like tokens from Chuck E. Cheese or something in exchange for and it's just it's an incredible story. I'll read for you some quotes when we come back next.
The news and
talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
He does not fit that mold.
Wow. Yeah, that's you're exactly right. Natural death, not assisted suicide. Let me just see. Do I have the bill pulled up here? I have it. Yeah, I have it here. It is HB 1536, an act to create the Compassionate Care End of Life Opinion Act. Now, this is I know we keep going to Dan Douglas going down to the well. He had a personal story of I guess his niece who was pregnant, who had a tough pregnancy, but he kept saying things like we need to be pro-humanity when it comes to taking the life, and so it seems that to me is not humanity at all. I mean, I guess I've never seen a Republican be so completely 180 degrees off of what the mainstream of their party is.
Yes, I mean this is not pro-humanity. This is just honestly and fundamentally disrespectful towards innocent human life. I mean, it's just disrespectful. There's no other way to say it. This bill is honestly it's worse than terrible. It's within the title. It legalizes physician-assisted suicide.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. It legalizes euthanasia in Arkansas. It legalizes what Jack Kevorkian was put in jail for.
Good grief. You are exactly right. And it says here it's an act to create the Compassionate Care End of Life Option Act to exempt prescribing or dispensing of a medication for self-administration by a patient under the Compassionate Care End of Life Option Act from the definition of physician-assisted suicide. So, and I've been I saw a few media reports on this, and they're not using the term assisted suicide from what I can tell. And I feel like that's key here because most people know what assisted suicide is and they're against it.
Yes, correct. And it's just unfortunate, and we have sometimes there's some liberal media outlets that obviously support physician-assisted suicide because the states that do have it are typically in the West Coast, like Oregon, Hawaii, California, and this bill is even worse than some of those states that do have physician-assisted suicide.
Oh my goodness! So I mean, obviously, this bill is, you would think, going to go down in flames. But I don't know. I mean, when Dan Douglas presents this bill, is he going to have? I would presume stories of people who are older, who suffered and wanted to die but weren't allowed to die, weren't allowed to take their lives. I mean, is that what's going to happen? Or I hope there's some motion that's made to just immediately consider this, or a motion do not pass or something. I mean, it needs to just not even be. It's a waste of time to even bring this up.
Yeah, this deserves. For those that don't know how committee works at the Capitol, the worst thing that can happen to your bill is the motion do not pass, and I mean, this honestly deserves that. But I think you'll have stories, but the American Family Association has already come out against this bill, and I think there are people in the palliative care community that are looking at it, and some that not all of them, but some will probably come out and be against it, and you're practically changing the profession of doctors.
Mm-hmm.
That you're supposed to. I mean, I talked to a state rep the other day. I said, are we really ready to have doctors where you go in when you're towards the end of your life thinking, ooh, is this doctor really trying to cure me and heal me? Or is this doctor trying to kick me down the road as quickly as possible and put me to death? I mean, that's the route we're going. And I don't want to have a doctor where I'm wondering, am I, costing the doctor way too much money and affecting their bottom line?
Listen to this. We're talking with Ken Yang. He's the Director of Governmental Affairs for the Family Council. You can find out more at familycouncil.org. Matter of fact, I'm reading an article that's up at familycouncil.org right now, headline Assisted Suicide Legislation Filed in Arkansas. One part of this article, Ken, under HB 1536, Christian hospitals, hospices, and healthcare facilities would not be able to stop doctors who work for them from prescribing suicide drugs to their patients. Is that true?
Correct. There's no provision currently in the bill as is that lets hospitals, hospices, or any other healthcare facility, like to prohibit their employees from taking part in physician-assisted suicide.
Wow. Well, I mean, it should be dead on arrival.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, folks, welcome to the program, hour number 2. Thank you so much for being with us. Thanks for starting the beginning of your week with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, we're going to talk with State Representative Dan Sullivan. I understand he is en route commuting to Little Rock right now. Also, we had a fantastic interview just now in the last hour. The podcast is the podcast being uploaded right now? Joe, it's already up. It's good to go. So, Mr. David Colbert, mental health activist, we talked about gambling and addictions here in Arkansas. We talked about the casino monopoly, the lottery monopoly. You talk about a wealth of knowledge. It's clear that this guy, David, and I've known David for a while now. He knows where the bodies are buried. You know what I mean? He knows the scams that have been going on. He knows the scammers that scam the scammers. You know what I mean? This whole thing is, we're talking about a gargantuan sum of money here that is obviously, it's inevitable. You can't stop it from bleeding over into politics and influencing how we govern ourselves. So you definitely need to check out that interview if you do anything today. And it'll be up on YouTube, so go to the Conduit News YouTube page and subscribe, and then click the little bell to receive notifications, so that when we upload this shorter interview here in just a little bit, you're going to be able to share it with your friends. Okay. Headline. Amanda Claire Curcio. Vendor closes eatery at state agency. Visually impaired owner cites theft, bullying over prices. I read this story several times yesterday, and I got angrier and angrier. The first thing that popped into my head about halfway through the story was Senator Mark Johnson. Senator Mark Johnson has this idea. He came up with this idea, and I think it's going to be put into this ethics package by the Senate. And this is a good idea that would basically, if you are convicted of a crime, then you lose your pension, and so it's a disincentive for these legislators and government employees. If you do stuff, you're going to lose your pension. If you do stuff that's illegal, you get convicted of it, you're going to lose your pension. And I can't think of any example where this should apply with what happened here. So Beverly Kendall is blind. Now, she's not totally blind from what I can tell. She can see a little bit, but legally she's blind. And she decided to open up under this, this provision where you open up, eateries and you serve government employees. And so she was doing this, had a little store at the Department of Human Services. And she says that there was, quote, blatant thieving. Now, why would there be blatant thieving going on? Well, because she's blind. And people are stealing from her. After months of blatant thieving by Department of Human Services employees, Beverly Kendall said she had no choice but to close her small eatery. Beverly's Snack Shop. It was It was in the central office, so the central office of the Department of Human Services in downtown Little Rock. The Gazette here says that she started in August. It is a state program that offers people who are blind or visually impaired business opportunities in government buildings. Matter of fact, there's one that it operates in the Capitol on the third floor. Right when you come out of the elevators to the right on the third floor, there's also another one of these little shops where somebody who is blind can run that business. Kendall said Human Services Department officials ignored her complaints about customers, mostly state employees within the agency, who routinely bullied her about prices and shoplifted goods. Okay, well, interesting. We also have the report that sometimes state workers paid, but they paid with fake money. They used things like old arcade tokens to pay for the meals. They would also lie about what size bill they handed her. They would repeatedly hand her $5 bills and claim that they had given her a 20 instead. They would then, according to this story, they would eat food while waiting in line and then leave before it was their turn to pay. Beverly Kendall is quoted as saying, quote, "They thought I was blind, so sometimes I could tell when they tried to undermine me because I had some sight. I thought I could make things better, but it didn't. I couldn't make a profit." Just what kind of people are we employing at the Department of Human Services? And to me, this seems like it was a rampant problem. This doesn't seem like it's like one or two people. It seems like it's an entire conspiracy to get free food. You think if it was one or two people, it would be one thing. The way I read this is just maddening to me. What kind of people are we employing at the Department of Human Services? And I got to say something else here. You've heard me repeatedly say that Arkansas has a government that is bloated. The DHS has got the highest. What is it? Last time I looked, are there 7,000 people, over 7,000 people that work for DHS alone? Is that true? I'm pretty sure that's the number. I mean, that's insane. I think that's the number that's the number that's in my head. So don't hold me to that, but that's just the number that's in my head. But you've heard me throw around the fact that it takes Arkansas almost $8,000 a person to run our government. And this is the result that we get. Where other states are, they're running their government on $5,000 a person. Okay, the vending facility program is overseen by the Services for the Blind Division, which falls under the department's purview. At least 16 vendors with visual impairments participate in the program statewide. Beverly Kendall said she was told nothing could be done. She went to the nonprofit Disability Rights for Arkansas for help. Christy Park, an attorney with the organization, said she contacted state officials, but the bullying and stealing continued. The attorney said it's a tricky situation. I'm not sure if there's anything legal we can do to address it. So the Gazette reached out to Amy Webb, who is the department's spokesman, and she told the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette in January that the agency has since installed cameras to monitor the area and security guards stand by during the lunch rush. You've got to be kidding me. This is such a problem that you now have to have security guards to make sure your own employees won't steal from blind individuals? I mean, what is this? Is this prison? Is that what this is? Is this lunchtime at prison? Amy Webb, a department spokesman, said, if someone is identified as giving non-legal tender, appropriate personnel action will be taken. Hopefully, like they would lose their pension. Right? Pretty sure if you accidentally hand over counterfeit money, I don't think that's an accident. By the way, interestingly enough, you would think that we would have maybe, video already. Is that video FOIA-able? Because they've got cameras now. Let's see. Some other vendors participating in the program meet quarterly. According to November meetings, Kendall raised concerns about customers being rude, but the minutes made no mention of the stealing, which Kendall said she discussed at length during the meeting. Interesting. Interesting that it doesn't show up on the minutes. Kendall closed shop in December. So even if we have government programs for the blind so that they can have a job, make a living, you got people that are going to steal from them. Her day was basically like this. She's quoted as saying, you arrive there at 5:30 a.m., you get the bacon, eggs, coffee done, you get ready for the crowd to come in at 7. I'm tired of getting up out of bed so early to have people bullying me all day. I've been bullied all my life. Being a blind individual, I can't do it anymore. This is how we make our living. We can't do this if they're stealing from us. The Gazette goes on. Annual reports show that there have been 15 to 17 businesses run through the vending facility program throughout the state. Another 15 to 16 mechanical vending machines scattered along Arkansas's highways also are maintained by people participating in the program. And earnings are modest. 2018 fiscal reports, Kendall made an average of $15,479 a year. That's supplemented by disability income from the federal funds. Roughly $770 a month for an individual puts the average vendor's annual salary at less than $24,800. Shame. 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 Unbelievable. The vending facility program is a way for people who are blind or visually impaired to have gainful employment, learn vocational skills, and interact with the general public, the attorney said for the Disability Rights Campaign. Any allegation of theft and mistreatment of individuals with disabilities are concerning. It is particularly concerning when the allegations are against employees of a state agency charged with protecting Arkansas and has a mission statement that declares, together we improve the quality of life for all Arkansans by protecting the vulnerable, fostering independence, and promoting better health. According to the information we have received, employees at the department's central office are doing the very opposite. Now, obviously, look, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to hate myself for saying this. Obviously, we're not talking about all government employees. Disclaimer. Are you happy now? Are everybody out there happy? Everybody feel good? We're not talking about everybody that works at DHS, right? Yeah, that's what you have to say here when you report on a story about government doing the things that government does. And this is what happens. But this is certainly egregious. This is certainly egregious. Exactly what? Exactly who? Who is this? Who are we employing? And if the person who is doing, I've got a theory. The people who are stealing from blind individuals, I got a feeling that their jobs really just aren't that productive. I'm going on a limb here. I'm going to say anybody who's actually done this, eaten food in line and then left, paid with a gaming token instead of an actual quarter or actual currency. Anybody who's actually done this, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say if you eliminated their job, nobody would notice any decrease in service at all. And we just had David Colbert on. So I say this in jest, but I'd take that bet. I would bet a large sum of money that whoever it is, however many employees it was, that were stealing from the blind woman, if you eliminated their job tomorrow, I'm going to deduce that if they're willing to do that, they're probably terrible employees elsewhere. And they're probably doing a whole lot more that we don't know about. So sad. And yeah, there is a component, a legitimate component of saying the people who work in government, and I know one specifically, who are doing a good job, who actually care about their fellow man. Yeah, this makes all of you look like thieves. We're going to take a break. 870-275-9799. You can call or text the number. Let us know what you think. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about what's on tap this week in the Arkansas General Assembly. The highway plan going to be facing a House committee and a full floor House vote, likely. Back in a minute. Allowed to die, weren't allowed to take their lives. I mean, is that what's going to happen? Or I hope there's some motion that's made to just immediately consider this, or a motion do not pass or something. I mean, it needs to just not even be. It's a waste of time to even bring this up.
Yeah, this deserves. For those that don't know how committee works at the Capitol, the worst thing that can happen to your bill is the motion do not pass, and I mean this honestly deserves that. But I think you'll have stories, but the American Family Association has already come out against this bill, and I think there are people in the palliative care community that are looking at it, and some that not all of them, but some will probably come out and be against it. And you're practically changing the profession of doctors.
Mm-hmm.
That you're supposed to. I mean, I talked to a state rep the other day. I said, "Are we really ready to have doctors where you go
in Arkansas? Every single hour, there is a politician not getting what they want. For some, it's an absolute nightmare. The sleepless nights, wondering if progress will ever come." Lying awake, pondering how to grow government in this political climate. Asking questions like, why don't my constituents want to pay a few cents more in taxes? Everyday politicians feel abused and neglected. These politicians are starving for power. They're hungry, confused, and they don't understand why no one seems to care. Will you be a patriot and commit today to help these poor, starved for power public officials? It's simple. All you have to do is commit to stay silent and never dissent or stand in the way of your politicians' rise to power. Never speak up or get engaged to stop the growth of government. By committing to these simple steps, you will ensure the life of your politician will be filled with contentment and the respect they are desperately seeking, as well as campaign contributions from lobbyists.
This message brought to you by Aristocrats Serving Arkansas.
PHP Parody. Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, here we go. We have a lot of stuff coming up this week. Really, the remaining part of the 92nd General Assembly. Right now, the plan is to keep the legislature in session until May the 6th, is what I heard. But they're going to adjourn. Last I heard, they will adjourn, or recess, rather. They will recess on April the 12th. And they will sine die, which is a term used for the death of the taxpayers. They will sine die on May the 6th. At least that's what I think the tentative plan is for the remainder of the 92nd General Assembly. Now, so in the weeks ahead, we have to look forward to something that we were covering last week a little bit, which is what constitutional amendments are they going to put, proposed constitutional amendments, are they going to put on the ballot for the people to vote? The House generally will get some input and pick one that they want. The Senate will pick one that they want. They'll both agree, and then there'll be a third one. Now, I said this last week. You don't have to refer any of them. It's not a requirement that you have to constantly amend the Constitution every 2 years. But most people down there think that because they can, they should. Now, one of the things that they do need to do is they need to fix the sovereign immunity situation in this state, which is really a disastrous thing that happened because of a Supreme Court ruling that says that the state of Arkansas can't be sued. They can't be a defendant in any of her courts. And that makes it really difficult. It gives the government the incentive to not care if they do something wrong, do something immoral or unethical to their people. If they injure us in some way, we have no recourse. So that's something to look forward to in terms of which constitutional amendment are they going to refer to the people. The Senate State Agencies Committee met last week. The House State Agencies Committee, I think, is going to meet this week. The chairman of that committee is State Representative Dwight Tosh. Now, another thing that they're going to be debating this week is the highway plan, the first half of the highway plan. The first half of the highway plan involves a tax increase of gasoline and diesel at the wholesale level. That means they will pass that tax on to the people at the pump, the consumer at the pump, which means you're looking at 3 to 6 cents more, depending on if you use gas or diesel. This cruised through the Senate last week, and it is expected to cruise through the House this week. So if any of you out there don't want your legislator to vote for tax increases, you need to get on the phone and start calling. They only need 51 votes because it's a brand new tax. It's pretty interesting. A lot of people haven't talked about this, but there's a reason that they're not referring this to the people. They want to refer the half-cent sales tax increase, which is already applied. We already pay it now, but it's set to expire and sunset, and so they want a new vote on a new tax. They're going to refer that to the people. That's the second part of the governor's highway plan. And if you actually read an article by Hunter Field, there's a quote in here from Marcus Richmond. House Majority Leader Marcus Richmond said that just about every member can find a small detail in the bill to oppose. But he said he's optimistic. But then he says the 0.5% tax extension will have a much tougher time mustering 51 votes. I found that interesting. That is the one benefit that I can see of passing what is, for the most part, clean bills with clear policy objectives. So the first part is a single bill, Senator Terry Rice running it, and it's as far as a policy objective, it's pretty clear. We're going to cut taxes. We're going to raise taxes at the wholesale level. We're going to use money from the general revenue and that sort of thing. That's a pretty clear, open and shut case. But then you have the second part, which is the referral. And so, say what you want to. The fix could probably, everybody could have already made their deals or whatever, but the referral to the voters to maintain the current tax rate that's set to expire, again, which would really be a betrayal in many ways of what we voted on in 2012, that may not pass. I mean, it probably will, but I mean, doing it in these different... See, in the past, I feel like we would have lumped all of this stuff together. Now, the results are probably the same. If they had lumped everything together, everything probably would have passed. They separate everything out, maybe everything passes. But it is interesting that the House Majority Leader Marcus Richmond says that the second part of this plan, this highway plan, the second bill that will refer to the voters, may have trouble getting 51 votes. That is certainly newsworthy, because that's the first I've heard of that being a possibility. that you passed half of the highway tax plan, but not the other. We're going to take a break. Back in just a moment.
When you're towards the end of your life thinking, ooh, is this doctor really trying to cure me and heal me? Or is this doctor trying to kick me down the road as quickly as possible and put me to death? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the route we're going. And I don't want to have a doctor where I'm wondering, am I, costing the doctor way too much money and affecting their bottom line?
Listen to this. We're talking with Ken Yang. He's the Director of Governmental Affairs for the Family Council. You can find out more at familycouncil.org. Matter of fact, I'm reading an article that's up at familycouncil.org right now, headline Assisted Suicide Legislation Filed in Arkansas. One part of this article, Ken, under HB 1536, Christian hospitals, hospices, and healthcare facilities would not be able to stop doctors who work for them from prescribing suicide drugs to their patients. Is that true?
Correct. There's no provision currently in the bill as is that lets hospitals, hospices, or any other healthcare facility to prohibit their employees from taking part in physician-assisted suicide.
Wow. Well, I mean, it should be dead on arrival, but I just couldn't believe this. I mean, listen, State Representative Dan Douglas is a really colorful guy, and but. For 2 weeks in a row, he speaks against a bill to outlaw abortion in Arkansas, which is what Arkansas's Constitution prescribes, if Roe versus Wade is overturned. And then he files an assisted suicide. To me, this is a story because this is something that, Republicans obviously can disagree on tax increases. I mean, in my opinion, they shouldn't, but they clearly are. It's something that happens, right? But they don't really disagree on being pro-life, from what I have found. We're the second most pro-life state in the nation, and so for a Republican to come out and speak against and then file assisted suicide, so you can kill old people, it's just mind-boggling to me, Ken.
And look, I mean, and if you delve into the bill itself, once the prescription of the drugs has been approved, there only needs to be that the actual patient doesn't have to be the one to pick it up from the pharmacist. It can be anyone that's determined to be associated with the patient that picks it up from the pharmacist. And so who's to say what are they going to do with that prescription? We hear horror stories all the time on the West Coast of people going to pick up that prescription and the patient changes their mind and well, nope, sorry, and they put them to death. But, there's just so many. It's just bad in general, but this thing is worse than any bill that you've seen around the country. And, I've been on their show a lot. I'm typically more.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much for being with us. And a happy Monday to everybody out there. As we're in the home stretch. We're in the middle of our coverage of the 92nd General Assembly, and welcome to the program. We have a member of that assembly, State Representative Dan Sullivan, on the phone. He is commuting to Little Rock right now. Dan, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, Paul, and I have pulled over to the side of the road, so I'm not using my phone illegally. I'm off the side here in Bald Knob, and I don't have my gun open carry either.
Oh,
so I'm in good shape down here in Bald Knob.
I see what you're saying. I think that's great. There's been some positive things happening when it comes to recognition out of the House, passing that resolution saying that we're a constitutional carry state.
Yeah, and Paul, let me just share with people, especially in Northeast Arkansas, I know the NRA is having a big Friends of the NRA banquet coming up here in the next few days. I just recently let my NRA membership expire. The NRA, I feel like, did not treat the legislature, those of us who have been great advocates for the NRA, we kind of got it put to us last session We try to follow what they do and listen to their counsel. And as a result of that, they gave me and a number of other legislators an A- rating through no fault of the legislatures. And I think the fault was with the NRA. And we had a pretty lengthy discussion with their representative and asked them to consider changing that rating, and they did not. So, Paul, I am letting my NRA membership expire, and I'll be going to the Gun Owners of America Association. I will not be attending the NRA banquet this year for the first time in quite a while. And I would just ask your listeners to consider what the NRA is doing in supporting our legislature, who's been strongly supportive of all gun rights.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, you know what you referenced, Dan, I definitely saw some of that. You know, scratching my head 2 years ago with with what the NRA was allowing to happen, you know, under the guise of Second Amendment, but it was actually more restrictions and more red tape. And the Gun Owners of America, they're no joke. They don't play around when it comes to understanding that the Second Amendment is what it is. It says what it says, and it's.
Paul,
go ahead.
Yeah, that blends in with Chris Ann Hall's being here in Arkansas this week. Just a fantastic series of meetings all around the state. And, Paul, I'm going to read a short quote from Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson said, "I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of society but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it away from them, but to inform their discretion by education. This is the true corrective of abuses of constitutional power." And that's exactly what Chris Ann Hall did this week. It's exactly what Patriots of 746 are doing. It's exactly what the Liberty Coalition is doing, is starting to inform people. And they're gaining a lot of support statewide for understanding what our constitutional rights are. And these groups of people are starting to meet small. It reminds me of the power the Tea Party had several years ago.
I agree. I wholeheartedly
and it's just so
agree.
exciting. It's so exciting to hear people like Chris Ann talking about the Constitution, about these groups. And I don't know, what did 746 grow from 3 or 4, maybe 100 to 17 or 13,000 now?
Yeah, 17,000. Yeah.
17,000. And it's really impactful. And it's exactly what Jefferson talked about. When people are uninformed, they're going to make wrong decisions. And it's about us helping educate the people rather than take their power away, which a central government will do, state or federal, and about educating the people so they understand what their powers and authorities are.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. We're talking with State Representative Dan Sullivan. Okay, Dan, the highway plan, half of the highway plan that includes tax increases on gas and diesel at the wholesale level, it sailed through the Senate last week, and it's expected to go through the House this week. Can you give us your thoughts on the plan?
Sure, and I'd be glad to, and I appreciate the question. Right now, I'm not going to be able to support the tax increase for a couple of reasons. You know, as I look at it, Paul, although bankruptcy is not exactly like a tax increase, they both fundamentally say that we have to tighten our belt first. If one declares bankruptcy or one is considering it, they have to go to the courts and the lawyers to decide on a plan to make sure you've tightened your belt first. Well, here, I think, and from my observations, there's a number of things that we haven't done, tightening our belt and looking at cost reductions before we go to the last resort of increasing taxes. Unfortunately, for our government, it seems like that's the path of least resistance. We think we can message this correctly, and the taxpayer will say, yeah, there's nothing else we can do. But when you're down in Little Rock and you're engaged in these things, you understand there's all kinds of ways that we can tighten our belt. Paul, I don't want to go into too much detail, but we had a whole year we went through with the federal government on what was called the Paris match. where we submit all of our Medicaid recipients to the feds, and they cross-match that with other people in other states. It turned out that we had what DHS said was a glitch. And when I dug into what a glitch meant, it turns out it was a lot more than just a glitch. It turns out we were paying $500 a month for about 10 to 12,000 people for about 9 to 12 months. Now, I don't know if your listeners have their phone handy or their calculator handy, but multiply 500 times 12 times 12. That's millions of dollars. And we had contractors that were supposed to be managing that for us. And those contractors, as far as I know, have not been held accountable for the loss of, even if you say, well, that wasn't all Arkansas money, it was some federal money, it was still the taxpayers' money. And I reach out, I think that calculates to above $60 million that the taxpayers pay. We look at other things that are coming down, and I know the governor and his staff have said that he's going to cut taxes and raise taxes, and it's cost neutral. Well, that's probably true, and if you accept that as true, and I'll give him that, then we as legislators have to look at other taxes that are coming up. It's not just what's proposed here in this one. They're proposing a 911 tax on your cell phone.
Yep.
And truly our current 911 system is not what we need. We need to upgrade it. It's a safety issue. But the governor's tax plan that balances doesn't include that. Nor does it, at this time, I think, include the internet sales tax and other fees that we're looking at raising. And as a legislator, I can't just balance what the governor's tax plan is on highways as a standalone. I have to balance what all these fee increases, what all those taxes are at the end of the day. I know you've said a number of times that at the end of the session, are the taxpayers paying more or paying less? So it's not, you can't really make this highway tax plan just a standalone. You have to put them all together.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's kind of the path of least resistance is to increase that. Paul, I just found out the other day, and I don't know the details, and I'm very cautious about rolling this out, and I hope to come back on when I know the details. But, the taxpayer pays association dues for all state agencies. So now let that sink in just a minute. Mm-hmm. If you have a member of a state agency, DHS, or other state agencies, we are paying, and that would be for our colleges too, or universities, we are paying, taxpayers pay association dues to the tune of $6.7 million.
Wow.
Now let that soak in, and there may very well be some dues that we need and should pay. But most of your people in the private sector, they assume that cost if they join and pay for their association, their professional dues, they're paying that. But we at the state level are paying $6.7 million. And I think before I vote for a tax plan, I want to know just what it is we're paying.
Yeah.
And if we can cut that down to $2 million or $3 million, fine. But we need to look at all of those things before we take that path of least resistance and increase the taxes on the taxpayer.
We're talking with Dan Sullivan, State Representative for District 53. He's pulled over on the side of the road en route to Little Rock. On the paying association dues, I mean, that's what the biggest lobby down there is, government lobbying for government. It's these government associations and things like that. That's what struck me, as you're down there long enough. And so you've always wondered maybe why. Well, if they're mandatorily, or if they're if the taxpayers are paying for these individuals to be a member of these associations, I mean, that to me is, I didn't know that. I didn't know that, Dan.
I didn't either. But I'll tell you, I have never had a state agency lobby me. Matter of fact, they've taken great pains not to. If I ask a question, they'll inform me of, answer my questions for me, and they'll help me learn more. But I have not had, and this is my third term, not had a representative from the state agency, DHS, the governor's office, or anywhere. I've not had one come up and say, we really need your vote here or really need your vote there. So, I think I really want to look into this, though. I tell you, you just had the guest prior to me was talking about, the gambling and the casino issue.
David Colbert.
Oh, that's another one. Yeah, that's just another one that I have a hard time supporting. We went through the whole deal with the tax on cigarettes, and we needed the money, we needed the revenue, so we taxed the vice, and we taxed the vice more, and we taxed the vice more. We finally bled it dry until we had the federal courts come out, and we had all the smoking settlements and all of that. Now we've bled that dry. So then our next course of action is to find another vice to tax. And we'll tax it more and tax it more until we finally bleed that dry. And we'll have to find another vice to tax to keep up state revenues. I wonder what the next vice we'll tax is. Because that seems to be, and you quoted Chris Ann as saying, if we don't learn from the mistakes of history, we'll continue to make the mistakes. It's a mistake to leverage taxes on a vice as a foundational principle for funding highways. Now, if you want to tax them a little bit, fine. We tax a lot of vices. We tax Twinkies and everything else. So if we're going to do that, I understand that, and I support that. However, to make it a fundamental principle and a foundational principle for funding our highways is not a long-term solution in my mind. So, when I talk about I can't support the highway bill, it's not just one thing. It's not just being against taxes. It's because I believe we're fundamentally building on a foundation that isn't sustainable. And I believe that we have not done all that we can to tighten our belt before we pass that tax on to the people. Maybe if we tightened our belt, I would support a 1 cent tax or a 3 cent tax. But I think there's more that we can do to lower that tax on the people, and that we need to do before we just take, again, the path of least resistance, is convince the people there's a huge need out there, our crisis.
Yeah.
And admittedly, there's a big problem. I'll certainly admit that.
And the next vice, you were talking about the next vice, Dan, it's clearly marijuana. I mean, that's what it's going to be.
Or others. I mean, there are plenty of vices out there.
Yeah. Well, you raised some interesting points, Dan Sullivan. I mean, you really do, and I appreciate it. I appreciate your stance on not, wanting to raise taxes. You're not the first person that I have heard that is uncomfortable funding roads with casino revenue. Now, I mean, I know it makes great sense on paper, but after that interview with Mr. Colbert last hour, and you really understand the mental health aspects of gambling and the addictions that nobody ever talks about. I mean, he was a wealth of knowledge. You start thinking, hang on, wait a second. Yeah, we'll have better roads eventually because we're going to have the money, but at what cost? What cost? What's the societal cost?
It's the same thing with tobacco. I mean, we put the tax up so high that people had to quit smoking, and when they quit, our revenues went down. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to tax, and then the lesson we learned from that is people got sick, and we had that cost also. And so now the lesson learned would be what? If we're going to tax a vice, we're going to tax it and create less of it, which means we have to increase the taxes on the vice to sustain the revenue levels, and eventually those revenue levels diminish or level out, and our costs don't. Mm-hmm. It just is not a foundational principle of taxing vices to create revenue. Is not a foundational principle.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, Dan, tell me about this Is it a resolution that you were backing and has to do with, is it pronounced Fong Gong? And
yes,
tell me about that.
Yeah. Many of your people may have seen it. That's been on public television and other documentaries where it's a spiritual group in China primarily that are being imprisoned for their spiritual beliefs. And folks, they're not Christians. They wouldn't believe like you and I, probably nowhere close. However, in China, they're being put in prison, and because of their religion. And China is doing anywhere from 60,000 to 100,000 organ transplants a year. Now, if you do that in the States, there's a tracking mechanism that tracks where the organs came from, where they're going. There's a, where it went, who did it, who did all the services. And China doesn't have any tracking like that. So they are imprisoning the Falun Gong and then harvesting their organs in order to sell them on the market. And then there's no tracking procedure. So you have people from all over the world going to China, getting these organs, being harvested primarily from these prisoners of conscience.
Wow.
And given to these folks as a revenue stream. And as a result of that, our U.S. Congress had a very similar resolution, almost the same one that we passed in Arkansas, that passed unanimously in the U.S. Congress, and it passed unanimously in the Arkansas House. So I was really, it started out like a lot of things do. You get a call as a legislator and saying, can you help us out? Would you meet with us? And I met with representatives of the Falun Gong, and again, we don't share religious beliefs at all, but we share a passion for life and the right to life.
Yeah.
And the right for people to have some, be able to have all the tracking that goes on here in the U.S. when these organs are harvested.
That's got to be a big business. That's got to be a big business. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You said it was unanimous. So you're saying Democrats supported a resolution condemning what's going on with the Falun Gong?
Correct. And it just seems a little bit, and I'm thankful for every time someone stands for life. I appreciate that vote. And it's just, I find it a little bit concerning that people would be opposed to harvesting an organ, but they're okay with harvesting a fetus. And I struggle with that a little bit. And again,
It's a hypocrisy.
Appreciate the support.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the support for this and hope that as a nation and as a state, we can grow. And it's really a step in the right direction, Paul, for people to recognize how important life is and how important that is. So it's a good step. And although it does seem to me a little bit hypocritical, it is a step in the right direction. And I want to encourage all. I appreciate the votes of every Democrat that supports that.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I also see the hypocrisy of being for abortion and being for this resolution. Hey, let me ask you this, Dan. Have any of your Democrat colleagues, who are Arkansas Democrats, have they ever pulled you to the side or anything and off the record confessed man, I wish our party wasn't so pro-abortion? Has that ever happened to you? Because it's happened to me. I've talked with one who said, we just, but they don't want to say that publicly,
Well, I've had it happen with some Democrats, not with any legislators. Hey, Paul, I want to jump backwards just a second. I left out a point. One of the things this is Scope Week, and last week was,
yes.
All the opportunities we had in Scope Week to increase business, economic development. When we have these, and other states are using it, advanced practice nurses, people are leaving the state. These are high-paying jobs, leaving the state. So all of these scope bills that have been defeated by some of the wealthiest people in Arkansas are lobbying and killing these bills that would help in economic development, help in economic growth, and we can't pass them.
I know.
However, we have a quick action closing fund with millions of dollars in it to bring in companies from China and other places. But we can't get behind businesses in our own state to expand.
Yeah.
So things like that really frustrate me, and I wonder, why would we pass a tax increase and turn away jobs or good-paying jobs, and we send those people to other states? That's a huge deal that I hope your listeners catch on to. The scope of practice is not just about medical issues. It's about economic development.
Yeah.
When we are sending people out of the state with high-paying jobs, and the people that have been for issue one are saying, well, we're turning doctors away. Doctors are going to other states. Well, folks, doctors in the state of Arkansas are sending advanced practice nurses out of the state. That's the reality of it. The medical society and the doctors are saying, we don't want these people practicing in Arkansas. We want them going to other states.
Yep.
And on the other hand, they'll turn around and say, well, we want to pass issue one so we'll bring doctors into the state. I find that very hypocritical. To a huge extent, here in the state of Arkansas.
We're out of time. State Representative Dan Sullivan, I appreciate it. Appreciate
Thanks,
the work
Paul.
you're doing. Okay, man, he's certainly one of the good guys, folks. And I know you can understand, you can tell that. What he's saying about scope of practice is extremely frustrating with me, too. The Public Health Committee is on lockdown, and they've got the numbers to where the Public Health Committee is controlled by the Medical Society. There are some freedom-minded individuals on that committee. There's just not enough to get past the Medical Society blockade on more freedom and more choice for consumers and professionals who just want to work the way they were trained to work. Back in a minute.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
This thing is worse than any bill that you've seen around the country. And, you know, I've been on their show a lot. And I'm typically more jovial, more, you know, just happy in general. But this is honest. This honestly makes me angry that someone who's a Republican, because I'm a Republican, would file something this egregious.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. You know, I think the entire state, you know, or the entire Republican Party, with the exception of State Representative Dan Douglas, would agree. So anyway, Ken Yang with Family Council, really appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us this morning and shedding light on this important issue that needs to be this needs to be killed, no pun intended, immediately.
Yes, and we're going to do our best to do so.
All righty. Thank you, Ken. I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
All righty. You can find that article, folks. It's up at familycouncil.org. And Ken, it's always...
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yep, you got to cut spending if you really want to get serious about limiting the size of government. You got to cut spending. You got to stop the. You know what's weird is, and we've talked about this before. If you don't cut spending, but you just simply quit raising taxes because of the balanced budget amendment, you know, it's the tax structure that actually drives the spending in the state. That's another way of looking at it. Folks, that's all the time we have for this hour. We'll be back here tomorrow with continuing coverage. We'll have the Conduit Weekly Scorecard of Mr. Josh Waters. Always excited to have him on. And then we'll be talking with Dr. Will Riley tomorrow, who is an African-American professor of political science at Kentucky State University. He is author of the book Hate Crime Hoax, How the Left is Selling a Fake Race War. Dr. Riley will be on the program tomorrow to talk about this Jussie Smollett hoax, I guess. Arkansas, have a great day. Have a great week. Be safe.